The C-130 transport lurched violently as it descended through the thin desert air, and Sarah Chen let out an exaggerated gasp, gripping her seat with white knuckles. The actual turbulence didn't bother her. She jumped from aircraft in worse conditions. But the young Marine sitting across from her needed to see fear, uncertainty, weakness. "First time deployed?" he asked with a sympathetic smile. Sarah nodded, forcing her voice to tremble slightly. "Is it always this rough?" "You get used to it," he assured her. "Where you headed?" "Fob Sentinel, administrative support." She fumbled with her poorly secured duffel bag as the plane bounced again, deliberately letting it slip from her grasp. The Marine caught it, giving her a reassuring pat on the shoulder that made her want to laugh. If he only knew. The loadmaster called out their approach, and Sarah took a deep breath, not from nerves, but to center herself in the role she was about to play. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, one of the first women to complete the Navy SEAL Heritage Program, holder of the Silver Star, veteran of 217 combat missions across 3 continents, was about to become the most helpless-looking recruit Fob Sentinel had ever seen. The rear ramp lowered, and the Afghan heat hit like a physical wall. Sarah squinted against the brilliant sunlight, her oversized helmet immediately slipping forward over her eyes. She pushed it back clumsily, hoisting her duffel bag in a way that made her look like she was wrestling an angry bear. Several Marines working near the landing zone noticed her struggle and exchanged amused glances. "Perfect." She took 3 steps down the ramp and caught her boot on a tie-down strap, stumbling forward. The young Marine from the plane caught her elbow. "Careful there. Takes a minute to get your ground legs back." "Thank you," Sarah said breathlessly, adjusting her crooked name tape that read simply CHEN, with no rank insignia visible. She'd deliberately chosen fatigues that fit poorly, rolled her sleeves incorrectly, and wore her gear like someone who'd learned everything from a manual but had never actually lived it. Across the compound, Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Webb watched the display with barely concealed contempt. At 38, Webb was old corps, a decorated infantry marine with 4 combat deployments who believed in earning your place through blood, sweat, and proof. He'd seen too many re-echelon personnel get shuffled forward for their career tickets without understanding the reality of life on a forward operating base. "Another tourist," he muttered to Corporal Jackson beside him. "Bet she's never been outside the wire." "Admin transfer from the manifest," Jackson confirmed, checking his tablet. "Some kind of logistics evaluation specialist." Webb snorted. "Specialist in making PowerPoint slides, more likely." Sarah was close enough now to hear every word, though she gave no indication of it. Her situational awareness was complete. She'd already cataloged 17 personnel in visual range, noted 3 security cameras, identified 2 weak points in the visible perimeter defenses, and memorized the locations of the armory, command center, and medical facility, all while appearing completely overwhelmed and lost. She approached Webb's group, her voice uncertain and apologetic. "Excuse me, I'm looking for—" She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, squinting at it in the sunlight. "The command building. I'm supposed to check in with Colonel Hartley." Webb exchanged a look with his team that clearly said, "Can you believe this?" before pointing toward a fortified structure across the compound. "That way. Can't miss it. Big building with the flag." "Oh, right, thank you so much." Sarah adjusted her helmet again, which had slipped down over her eyes once more. She started walking in the indicated direction, then stopped and turned back. "Sorry, which flag?" Jackson coughed to cover a laugh. Webb's expression was priceless, a mixture of disbelief and resignation. "The American flag," Webb said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "The big one on the pole." "Got it, thanks again." Sarah gave an awkward little wave and started walking, deliberately taking a route that would lead her past maximum points of observation. She needed to see everything, and she needed them to see her as harmless, incompetent beneath notice. She made it 15 feet before her boot caught on a sandbag that any trained soldier would have stepped over without thinking. Sarah went down hard, her duffel bag spilling open, scattering clothing and personal items across the dusty ground. The impact was real. She'd committed to the fall, and it hurt. "Jesus Christ," she heard Webb mutter. Footsteps approached and Jackson appeared above her, extending a hand. "You all right, ma'am?" Sarah took his hand, brushing dust from her uniform with her other hand, her cheeks flushed with what looked like embarrassment but was actually the effort of not laughing at the absurdity of her own performance. "I'm fine, thank you. I'm so clumsy. It's the altitude, I think, and the heat. It's really hot here." "You're in Afghanistan," Jackson said gently, helping her gather her scattered belongings. "It's a desert." "Right, of course. I knew that." Sarah shoved items back into her bag without any organizational sense, creating chaos that made Jackson wince. Back at Webb's position, Lieutenant Jake Morrison had joined the group. At 32, Morrison led the base's Marine Special Operations team, a tight unit of raiders who'd been in country for 6 months running high-risk operations. He watched the scene with professional detachment. "That's our new logistics evaluator?" he asked. "Apparently," Webb confirmed. "God help us if she has to evaluate anything more complicated than a filing cabinet." Morrison didn't laugh. Something about the woman bothered him, though he couldn't identify what. Maybe it was the way her eyes moved, quick, methodical sweeps of her surroundings that seemed at odds with her clumsy behavior. Or maybe he was just tired, seeing things that weren't there. Sarah finally made it to the command building, threw a salute to the guard that was technically correct but looked unpracticed, and disappeared inside. The moment she was out of sight, her entire demeanor changed. Her back straightened, her movements became fluid and purposeful, and her eyes took on the sharp focus of a predator. Colonel Hartley looked up from his desk as she entered his office and closed the door behind her. "Colonel," she said crisply, her voice transformed, clear, authoritative, confident. She removed a sealed envelope from an inner pocket of her vest and placed it on his desk. Hartley opened it, reading quickly. His eyebrows rose. "Lieutenant Commander," he said, standing to shake her hand properly. "Your reputation precedes you, though I have to say that entrance was convincing." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "I was going to say Academy Award worthy." Hartley gestured to a chair. "How bad is it?" Sarah's smile vanished. "Sir, in the 90 seconds between landing and entering this building, I identified 11 critical security vulnerabilities, 3 of which could be exploited for a successful assault on this facility. Your patrol patterns are predictable. Your perimeter defense relies too heavily on technology with insufficient redundancy, and your personnel have become complacent." She leaned forward, her expression grave. "Intelligence suggests a significant enemy force is planning an operation against this base within the next 72 hours. My mission is to assess your readiness and identify weaknesses before that happens. Based on what I've seen so far, Colonel, if they hit you tonight, you'd lose this base and everyone in it." Hartley's face paled slightly. "What do you need?" "Time to observe without interference. Your people need to keep thinking I'm exactly what I appear to be, an incompetent paper pusher they can ignore. It'll let me see how they really operate when they think no one important is watching. And then—" Sarah's eyes hardened with determination. "Then we fix this before people die." The next morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made the Afghan landscape look deceptively peaceful. Sarah had spent the night in temporary quarters, but she hadn't slept much. Instead, she'd reviewed base schematics, studied patrol logs, and documented every security flaw she'd observed. The picture was worse than she'd initially thought. At 600 hours, she emerged from her quarters looking even more disheveled than the day before. Her helmet sat crooked on her head, her body armor was fastened incorrectly with one strap twisted, and she carried her rifle, unloaded, as per her cover story, like it might bite her. Gunnery Sergeant Webb was waiting near the motor pool with his fire team, their expressions ranging from amused to resigned. They'd been assigned to take the admin specialist on a routine perimeter patrol, glorified babysitting duty that none of them wanted. "Morning, ma'am," Webb said with exaggerated formality. "Ready for your big adventure outside the wire?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically, missing the sarcasm entirely. "Oh yes, I'm so excited to see how real operations work. I've read so much about it in the manuals." Corporal Jackson turned away to hide his grin. Lance Corporal Martinez whispered something to Private First Class Kowalski that made both of them snicker. Webb stepped closer, his voice taking on the slow, deliberate tone of someone explaining something to a particularly dim child. "All right, ma'am, let's start with basic weapons handling. This," he held up his M4, "is your rifle. Magazine goes here, charging handle here, safety selector here." Sarah watched with wide-eyed attention, nodding at everything. "So the bullets come out this end?" she asked, pointing to the muzzle. "Yes, ma'am," Webb said, his patience visibly wearing thin. "That's the dangerous end. Please don't point it at anyone unless you intend to shoot them." "Right, got it. Don't point the dangerous end at friends." She adjusted her grip on her own rifle, managing to make it look awkward and unsafe simultaneously. Martinez leaned toward Jackson. How did she even make it through basic? "Probably some officer training program where they just hand out rifles and hope for the best," Jackson muttered back. The patrol route was simple, a clockwise sweep of the base perimeter, checking fence integrity and observing the surrounding terrain for any signs of enemy activity or preparation. It was the same route they'd run dozens of times before, following the same timing, the same stops, the same everything. Sarah noticed immediately, pattern of life, predictable, exploitable. As they walked, Webb continued his condescending tutorial. "See those mountains, ma'am? That's where the bad guys like to watch from, and those wadis, dry riverbeds, that's how they approach without being seen." "Fascinating," Sarah said, genuinely meaning it, though not for the reasons Webb thought. She was mapping sight lines, calculating approach vectors, identifying exactly how she would attack this base if she were the enemy. The answer came quickly: southern perimeter between guard towers 4 and 5, during the gap in patrol timing between 7:30 and 8:15. She checked her watch, 7:24. They were approaching the motor pool now, a collection of Humvees, MRAPs, and support vehicles parked in neat rows. The team was relaxed, joking among themselves, barely maintaining tactical awareness. Sarah opened her mouth to ask another naive question when the world exploded. The blast wave hit first, a pressure wall that knocked Sarah backwards into Webb. The sound came a microsecond later, a thunderous crack that rattled teeth and stunned eardrums. Guard Tower 5 disintegrated in a ball of orange flame and black smoke. For one frozen moment, everyone stood paralyzed by shock. Then the alarm began its distinctive wail, and all hell broke loose. Contact south," someone screamed over the radio. Small arms fire erupted from multiple positions beyond the fence line. Rounds snapped through the air with that distinctive crack that meant they were close, too close. The fence itself suddenly sagged and collapsed as explosives tore a 15-foot gap in the perimeter. Through the smoke and dust, Sarah saw them coming. Insurgents in tactical gear, moving with the practiced efficiency of trained fighters. Not the typical Taliban or local militia, these were professionals. And they were heading straight for the command center, which meant they knew exactly where the classified intelligence was stored. Webb and his team scattered, seeking cover behind the vehicles. "Get down," Webb shouted at Sarah, assuming she'd freeze like the helpless recruit she appeared to be. But Sarah wasn't moving toward cover. She was moving forward toward the threat. Her body shifted into a different mode entirely. The fumbling, awkward persona evaporated like morning mist. Every movement became precise, economical, lethal. Her rifle came up in a perfect high-ready position, her stance solid and balanced. 3 insurgents had broken ahead of the main assault force, exploiting the gap in response time exactly as Sarah had predicted would happen. They were sprinting toward the command center, AK-47s at the ready, 40 meters out and closing fast. Sarah closed the distance in explosive bursts of speed that left Webb staring in shock. The first insurgent didn't see her until she was inside his defensive perimeter. She deflected his weapon with her left hand while driving the buttstock of her rifle into his solar plexus with her right. The technique was textbook close-quarters battle, one of thousands of hours of training with SEAL Team 6. The insurgent's body armor absorbed some of the impact, but the force still doubled him over. Sarah's follow-through was instantaneous, a precise strike to the side of his neck that shut down his nervous system. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. 2 seconds elapsed. The second insurgent was turning, bringing his weapon to bear, when Sarah's sidearm cleared her holster. The Sig Sauer P-226 was an extension of her body, trained into muscle memory through countless hours on the range. 2 shots sent her mass 4 inches apart. The insurgent's body armor caught the rounds, but the kinetic impact sent him stumbling backward. Sarah advanced, fired twice more as his armor rode up throat shots. He went down. 17 seconds elapsed. The third insurgent was the smartest. He'd seen what happened to his companions and was already seeking cover, swinging his AK-47 toward Sarah. She couldn't reach him in time, couldn't get a clean shot before he fired. So she threw herself into a forward roll that would have made her CQB instructors proud, came up inside his firing arc, and drove her knife, pulled from her boot sheath mid-roll, into the gap between his vest panels. The blade found soft tissue between his ribs. His weapon discharged skyward as he collapsed. 40 seconds total. Sarah stood among 3 neutralized threats, her breathing controlled, weapon up and scanning for additional hostiles. Behind her, Webb and his entire team stood frozen in various states of shock and awe. The base alarm continued its wailing. Gunfire still echoed across the compound as Marines engaged the main assault force. But in this small space, in this critical moment, silence fell like a hammer. "What?" Webb's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "What the hell? Who are you?" Sarah turned to face him, and the difference was stunning. Gone was every trace of the bumbling, helpless recruit. The woman standing before them radiated lethal competence, her stance that of a warrior who'd seen more combat than most of them would in their entire careers. "Someone who's been trying to tell you that your security protocols are inadequate," Sarah said calmly, ejecting her magazine to check her round count before slamming it home again. "And someone who's about to explain to Colonel Hartley exactly how the enemy knew the precise timing of your patrol patterns, the exact location of your defensive gaps, and why this base is going to get hit again. Much harder, unless we fix this immediately." She keyed her radio. "Actual, this is Chen. Southern perimeter breach is contained. 3 EKIA. Recommend you assemble all senior personnel in the command center in 10 minutes. We need to talk." Martinez finally found his voice. "Chen, I thought you were just—" "Wrong assumption, Marine," Sarah interrupted, her tone sharp but not unkind. "And assumptions get people killed. Now secure these weapons and get to your positions. This attack was a probe, which means they're gathering information for the real assault." She looked at Webb directly, saw the questions and confusion and dawning respect in his eyes. "Explanations later, Gunny. Right now we have work to do." The fresh recruit they'd mocked was giving orders like she owned the place. And somehow, that felt absolutely right. The command center buzzed with controlled chaos. Marines and Navy personnel crowded into the briefing room, still riding the adrenaline from the attack. Wounded were being treated in the medical bay. Damage assessment teams cataloged the destruction. And everyone wanted to know who the hell the mystery woman was who'd just taken down 3 insurgents in less than a minute. Sarah stood outside Colonel Hartley's office, her rifle now properly slung, her posture ramrod straight. The poorly fitted uniform suddenly didn't look so poorly fitted anymore. It was simply a uniform on a warrior who carried herself with absolute confidence. Webb, Morrison, and several other senior personnel watched her warily, as if seeing her for the first time. "Colonel's ready for you, Commander," the aide said, and several heads snapped around at the word Commander. Sarah entered the office. Hartley sat behind his desk, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past hour. Lieutenant Morrison, Captain Rachel Torres from Intelligence, and Master Sergeant Davis from the base security force were already present. "Close the door," Hartley said quietly. Sarah complied, then removed a sealed envelope from an inner pocket of her vest, not the same one she'd given Hartley yesterday, but a secondary authorization. She placed it on his desk. "Sir, I'm invoking Operational Protocol Sierra 7. My cover is compromised, and the tactical situation requires immediate transparency with your command staff." Hartley opened the envelope, scanned the contents, and slid it to Morrison. The lieutenant's eyes widened as he read, then he passed it to Torres, who inhaled sharply. "Read it aloud, Captain," Hartley ordered. Torres cleared her throat, her voice uncertain. "Authorization code Zulu 97 Bravo, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, United States Navy, service number," she trailed off, skipping to the relevant section. "Current assignment, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, Dam Neck, Virginia. Previous assignments include SEAL Team 3, SEAL Team 7, and DVGRU." The silence was absolute. Torres continued, her voice gaining strength. "Combat decorations include Silver Star for actions in Yemen, Bronze Star with Valor Device for actions in Syria, Purple Heart, Navy Commendation Medal with Valor Device, 3 awards, Combat Action Ribbon, 7 awards." She looked up. "Ma'am, you have 217 confirmed combat missions across 3 continents." Morrison spoke first, his voice carefully controlled. "DVGRU, you're telling me she's from SEAL Team 6. "Was," Sarah corrected. "Past tense. I'm technically still assigned there, but I'm not deployable to direct action missions anymore." She touched her left shoulder unconsciously. "Training accident 14 months ago. Rotator cuff damage. I can't pass the physical requirements for maritime ops or Halo insertions anymore." "So what are you doing here, pretending to be?" Morrison struggled for words. "Whatever that was yesterday." Sarah's expression hardened. "I'm here because Naval Special Warfare Command received intelligence 3 weeks ago suggesting that FOB Sentinel was being targeted for a major assault. Not harassment fire or random attacks. A coordinated operation designed to overrun this facility, eliminate personnel, and capture or destroy sensitive materials." She moved to the large tactical map on the wall, her fingers tracing the base perimeter. "An Avius BCWAR needed an assessment of your defensive readiness, but it had to be covert. If the enemy has intelligence assets watching this base, and after this morning I'm certain they do, then bringing in an obvious assessment team would have tipped them off." "So you came in as a hapless admin officer," Torres said, understanding dawning. "They'd ignore you and you could observe without interference." "Exactly. And what I observed in 24 hours confirmed the intelligence assessment. This base is not prepared for what's coming." Sarah's voice was professional but urgent. "Your patrol patterns follow the same routes and timing every single day. Your perimeter defense relies heavily on electronic surveillance with insufficient roving sentries. Your quick reaction force protocols have a 7-minute response gap during shift changes. Your classified material storage has adequate physical security, but terrible procedural security. I watched 3 people enter and exit without proper logging yesterday." Morrison's face flushed. "Some of those are my responsibilities." "I'm not here to assign blame, Lieutenant. I'm here to fix problems before they get people killed." Sarah turned to face them. "That attack this morning wasn't random timing. They hit us precisely during the vulnerability window I identified, between patrol rotations when your southern sector had minimal coverage. They knew exactly where to hit and when. How? Davis asked, his gravelly voice cutting through. How could they know our internal patrol schedules? That's the question that terrifies me, Sarah admitted. Either they've been watching long enough to pattern your operations, or they have access to information they shouldn't have. Either way, it means they're planning something significant, and this morning was just reconnaissance in force. Hartley leaned forward. Your assessment, how much time do we have? 48 to 72 hours maximum. They'll need time to analyze what they learned from this probe, our response times, weapons placements, reinforcement protocols. Then they'll come with everything they have. Numbers? Torres asked. Based on the sophistication of this morning's attack and the intelligence reports, I estimate 60 to 80 combatants, possibly with heavy weapons. Professional fighters, not local militia. Morrison whistled low. We've got 43 combat personnel on base right now. 2-to-1 odds may be worse. Which is why we need to change everything, Sarah said firmly. New patrol routes, new timing, new defensive positions. We need to make them throw out whatever intelligence they gathered today and start over, except we won't give them time to gather new intel. You want to redesign our entire defensive posture in less than 3 days. Davis sounded skeptical. I want to redesign it in the next 18 hours, then spend the following day drilling your personnel until they can execute it in their sleep. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Master Sergeant, I know it sounds impossible, but I've planned and executed defensive operations in worse situations with less time. It can be done. And you want to run this operation? Morrison asked. It wasn't quite a challenge, more like he was trying to understand the chain of command. That's Colonel Hartley's decision, Sarah said, looking at the base commander. Sir, my orders give me authority to take tactical command if necessary, but I'd prefer to work with your existing command structure. Lieutenant Morrison and his team know this AO better than I do. Master Sergeant Davis knows the base infrastructure. Captain Torres has the intelligence picture. I bring specialized training and experience, but this needs to be a collaborative effort. Hartley considered for a long moment, then stood. Here's what's going to happen. Commander Chen has tactical authority for defensive preparations. Morrison, you and your MSOT will work directly with her. Davis, base security falls under her operational command. Torres, you'll provide all relevant intelligence updates immediately. He paused. And we need to brief the rest of the base. They deserve to know who's really been walking among them. Sir, Sarah interjected, I recommend a measured approach. Brief the senior NCOs and team leaders first. Let them digest it, then cascade the information down. If we call a general assembly right now, we'll lose hours we can't afford to lose. Agreed. Hartley checked his watch. Morrison, get your team leads in here in 15 minutes. Davis, same with your security chiefs. Torres, start pulling every piece of intel we have on enemy force composition in this sector. As they moved to leave, Morrison paused at the door. Commander, one question. That thing you did this morning, taking down 3 armed hostiles in 40 seconds, is that standard SEAL training, or were you just showing off? Sarah allowed herself a small smile. That was me being rusty, Lieutenant. A year ago, it would have taken 30 seconds. Morrison shook his head in disbelief and left. Webb appeared in the doorway as Morrison exited, his expression a complicated mix of embarrassment and respect. Gunny, Sarah acknowledged him. Ma'am, I need to apologize. The things I said, the way I treated you, were exactly what I needed you to do, Sarah interrupted. You reacted to what I showed you, which was the point. No apology necessary. Still feel like an idiot, Webb muttered. Then use that feeling, Sarah said, her tone becoming instructional. Every time you want to dismiss someone based on appearances, remember this. The enemy uses the same tactic. They look like farmers until they're shooting at you. Never assume. Webb straightened. Yes, ma'am. What do you need from me and my team? Your trust and your experience. I need Marines who know this base and this fight. You've got 4 combat tour, Gunny. That knowledge is valuable. I'm asking you to help me keep your fellow Marines alive. You've got it, Commander. Whatever you need. As Webb left, Torres approached Sarah quietly. Commander, off the record, what are our real chances here? Sarah considered the question carefully. Captain, I've been in worse situations and survived, but I've also been in better situations where good people died. If we do everything right, prepare perfectly, and execute flawlessly, I'd say we've got a 70% chance of holding this base with acceptable casualties. And if we don't do everything right? Sarah's eyes were hard as flint. Then we make damn sure the enemy pays such a high price for this ground that they'll never forget it. Either way, they're going to learn that Fob Sentinel isn't an easy target anymore. That's not very reassuring. No, Sarah agreed, but it's honest. And right now, honest is all I can offer. The afternoon sun turned the firing range into a furnace, heat waves shimmering off the desert floor. Sarah stood at the 50-meter line, her borrowed M4 held in a relaxed, ready position. Word had spread through the base like wildfire. The helpless recruit was actually a decorated SEAL commander, and now half the base had found reasons to be near the range. Staff Sergeant Danny Costa stood behind the firing line with his arms crossed, his jaw tight. At 29, Costa was Morrison's second-in-command on the MSOT, a Force Recon Marine with 2 Bronze Stars who'd earned his place through blood and grit. The revelation about Sarah had hit him harder than most. He felt deceived, manipulated, made to look foolish in front of his men. You don't have to prove anything to us, Commander, Costa said, his voice carefully neutral but with an edge underneath. We've seen your file now. We know what you can do. Sarah lowered her weapon and turned to face him. That's exactly why I do have to prove it, Staff Sergeant. You've seen a piece of paper with numbers on it. You need to see what those numbers actually mean. She nodded to the range master, who activated the target carrier. A standard silhouette target began moving downrange, stopping at 50 meters, a distance where most shooters needed optics for consistent accuracy. Iron sights only, Sarah said, deliberately making it harder on herself. She dropped the magazine, cleared the chamber, and handed the weapon to Costa. Check it. I want you to know this isn't a trick rifle. Costa examined the M4 thoroughly, standard issue, nothing special, iron sights slightly worn from use. He handed it back with a curt nod. Sarah loaded a fresh magazine, chambered a round, and settled into her stance. No rush, no theatrics. She simply became still, her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. The first shot broke clean. Then the second, third, fourth, fifth, a smooth rhythm that spoke of thousands of hours on ranges across the world. She fired 15 rounds in measured succession, then safed the weapon and stepped back. Target's up, she called. The range master retrieved the target and brought it forward. A crowd had gathered now, Marines, sailors, even some of the administrative personnel who'd heard the commotion. They pressed closer to see. The target had a single ragged hole in the center mass, maybe 3 inches across. All 15 rounds had passed through essentially the same point of impact. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. That's impossible at 50 meters with iron sights, another voice said. Costa stared at the target, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Sarah, really looked at her for the first time since the reveal. The Navy marksmanship record. Morrison said you held it for 3 years. Still do, technically, Sarah said, ejecting the magazine. Nobody's beaten my score yet, though I'm getting rusty. A year ago that group would have been tighter. She handed the rifle back to the range master and walked toward Costa, lowering her voice so only he could hear. You're angry with me. That's fair, and I'm not going to tell you not to be. But I need to know, can you put that anger aside and work with me? Because what's coming won't care about hurt feelings or wounded pride. It'll just kill anyone who isn't ready. Costa's jaw worked for a moment. You made us look like fools. My Marines, good men who have bled for this country, they treated you like a joke because you wanted them to. Yes, Sarah said simply, not offering excuses. Why the deception? Why not just come in honest, do your assessment openly? Sarah gestured toward the perimeter. Because the enemy is watching this base, Staff Sergeant. They have eyes on us somehow. If I'd arrived as who I really am, a DEVGRU operator sent to assess your defenses, that information would have reached them within hours. They'd have changed their plans, delayed their attack, or shifted to a different target. But this way, they think they caught us unprepared. They think this morning's probe showed them a soft target with slow reactions and poor security. She paused, letting that sink in. They're wrong. And when they come with everything they have, expecting an easy victory, we're going to teach them a very painful lesson. But only if every person on this base is working together. Only if we trust each other. Trust is earned, Commander, not given. You're absolutely right, Sarah nodded to the range. Which is why I'm out here, showing you what I can do instead of just telling you. Which is why I'm about to spend the next 12 hours working alongside your Marines, learning from them, listening to their expertise about this base and this terrain. She extended her hand. I'm asking you to give me the chance to earn that trust, not as a commander pulling rank, but as a fellow warrior who wants to keep your people alive. Costa stared at her hand for what felt like an eternity. The crowd around them had gone quiet, sensing the importance of this moment. Finally, he grasped her hand firmly. What do you need, Commander? Relief flooded through Sarah, though she didn't let it show. Your honest assessment of our defensive capabilities. The real picture, not the official reports. Where are we actually vulnerable? Costa pulled out a tactical map of the base, spreading it on a nearby table. Morrison joined them, along with Webb and several other team leaders. They gathered around the map like surgeons planning a complex operation. Southern perimeter between towers 4 and 5, Costa began, pointing. We all know it now because that's where they hit us this morning. But there's more. The northwest corner has a blind spot where the fence line meets that rock formation. Electronic sensors are there, but their temperamental dust storms trigger false positives, so we've started ignoring them. That's a problem, Sarah said, marking the location. What else? Eastern approach has good sight lines, but it's also where the access road comes in, Morrison added. We can't block it completely without cutting ourselves off from resupply convoys. During vehicle traffic, we're vulnerable to a VBIED. Vehicle-borne IED, Sarah nodded. How's your vehicle inspection protocol? Webb grimaced. Honestly, ma'am, it's gotten sloppy. We know the regular supply drivers, so we've started waving them through with just visual checks. That stops today, Sarah said firmly. Every vehicle gets a full inspection every time. I know it slows things down, but it only takes one truck we don't check properly. She looked around the group. What about interior security, fields of fire, fallback positions, choke points? For the next 2 hours, they went through every aspect of the base's defenses. Sarah listened more than she spoke, asking questions, taking notes, treating these combat-experienced Marines as the subject matter experts they were. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted from confrontational to collaborative. A young lance corporal named Rodriguez approached hesitantly during a break. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course. Why'd you leave the teams? I mean DVGRU, that's the pinnacle. Why give that up? Sarah touched her left shoulder unconsciously, a gesture that was becoming familiar. I didn't give it up, Rodriguez. It was taken from me. Training accident during a fast rope insertion. The rope snapped, I fell 30 feet, landed wrong. Torn rotator cuff, damaged labrum, nerve damage. She could see the sympathy in his eyes and held up a hand. Don't feel sorry for me. I had an incredible run. Got to serve with the best warriors in the world, did missions that mattered, made a real difference. The injury ended one chapter, but it opened another. Now I get to use everything I learned to help people like you survive and succeed. That's not a consolation prize, that's a new mission. But doesn't it kill you, Rodriguez asked, knowing you can't go back? Sarah considered the question seriously. Some days, yeah, I still dream about being back on the teams, but I learned something important. There's more than one way to serve, more than one way to fight. Right now, keeping this base and everyone in it alive, that's my fight. And it matters just as much as anything I did with DEVGRU. Morrison had been listening. Commander, can I ask what happened in Yemen? The Silver Star citation says you saved your entire platoon, but the details are classified. Sarah was quiet for a moment, memories flickering behind her eyes. Ambush in the Hadramaut Valley. We were compromised, surrounded, taking fire from 3 directions. Our team chief was KIA in the first 30 seconds, second in command was wounded. Someone needed to lead, so I did. We fought our way to a defensible position, held for 6 hours until QRF arrived. 16 of us went in, 14 came home. We lost 2 good men. Her voice remained steady, but everyone could hear the weight in it. I got a medal, but those 2 guys got flag-draped coffins. You never forget that. Never forget that the decisions you make in combat have consequences measured in lives, not points on a scorecard. The group fell silent, the levity of moments before replaced by somber understanding. That's why I'm so hard on security protocols, Sarah continued. Why I'm pushing you to change everything in 18 hours. Because I've seen what happens when we get complacent, when we assume we're safe. Good people die, and I'm not going to let that happen here if I can possibly prevent it. Costa stepped forward. Then let's get to work, ma'am. Show us what you've got in mind. For the rest of the afternoon and into the evening, Sarah worked alongside the Marines, earning respect through sweat and competence rather than rank. She didn't just issue orders, she got her hands dirty, helping fill sandbags, reposition crew-served weapons, test sight lines personally. When a young private struggled with fear, still shaken from the morning's attack, Sarah sat with him. What's your name, Marine? Private Hernandez, ma'am. First Combat Hernandez. He nodded miserably. I froze up. When the shooting started, I couldn't move. You know what that's called? Sarah asked gently. That's called being human. Every single person in combat feels fear. The difference between a warrior and a casualty is what you do with that fear. You don't get rid of it, you can't. But you can learn to move through it, to function despite it. How? Training, repetition, trusting your team, and knowing that the person next to you is counting on you to do your job. She put a hand on his shoulder. Hernandez, this morning was chaos. Tomorrow, when they come again, you'll be ready. We'll all be ready. And you won't freeze because you'll know exactly what to do. Trust the training, trust your team, trust yourself. Hernandez looked at her with something like hope. Yes, ma'am. As darkness fell, Sarah stood on the command center roof with Morrison, surveying their work. The base looked different now, new fighting positions, revised patrol routes, fields of fire cleared and optimized. Think it'll be enough? Morrison asked. Ask me in 48 hours, Sarah replied. Then more quietly, thank you for trusting me, Jake. I know it wasn't easy. You earned it, he said simply. That's all any of us can ask. Night settled over Fob Sentinel like a suffocating blanket, the temperature plummeting from scorching to frigid in the way only the desert could manage. Sarah sat in the command center, satellite imagery spread across the table in front of her, each foe telling a story she wished she didn't have to read. Captain Torres pointed to thermal signatures 8 kilometers northeast of the base. These positions weren't here yesterday. We're seeing increased activity, vehicle movement, supply staging, personnel concentration. Sarah leaned closer, her trained eye picking out details others might miss. That's not just increased activity, Captain, that's final preparation. They're organizing into assault teams. She counted the distinct heat signatures. 60-plus individuals, maybe 70. And these heat blooms here and here, those are heavy weapons. PKM machine guns at minimum, possibly a DSHK or two. Morrison studied the images over her shoulder. Those are 12.7 heavy machine guns. They'll punch right through our sandbag positions. Which is why we've repositioned our fighting positions with double-layered barriers and offset firing lanes, Sarah replied. They'll have the firepower advantage, but we've got superior positioning and prepared defenses. She looked up at Colonel Hartley. Sir, I recommend we move to THREATCON Delta. Lock down the base, full battle rattle for all personnel. Shift to combat watch rotation. Hartley nodded grimly. Make it happen. As orders went out across the base, Sarah pulled up the latest SIGINT intercepts. The intelligence was fragmentary. The enemy had good communications discipline, but certain phrases kept appearing in the chatter. Final push. Ghost operation. Maximum pressure. They're calling it Operation Ghost Hammer, Torres said quietly. Our translators caught that reference 3 times in the last 6 hours. Poetic, Morrison muttered. They planning to haunt us or just kill us? Both, probably. Sarah straightened, rolling tension from her shoulders. They want to overrun this base completely, eliminate all personnel, seize the advanced weapons systems in our armory, and disappear before reinforcements arrive. Classic hit-and fade, except with overwhelming force. She moved to the large tactical display showing the base layout with all their new defensive positions marked in blue. Enemy approach routes were highlighted in red, creating an ominous spider web of potential attack vectors. All right, let's walk through this one more time, Sarah said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd done this before. They'll probe first mortars, harassing fire trying to identify our response patterns. We don't take the bait. Minimum return fire, stay in hardened positions, preserve ammunition. When does the real assault come? Webb asked from the doorway. His team had just rotated off perimeter duty. Between 0200 and 0400. Darkest part of the night, maximum fatigue for defenders, minimal visibility. They'll hit us from multiple directions simultaneously. My guess is 3 main axes of attack with a feint to draw our quick reaction force out of position. Costa traced the likely approaches on the map. Northeast, south, and northwest, with the feint coming from the east making us think they're going for the access road. Exactly. Sarah was impressed by how quickly he'd adapted to thinking like the enemy. Our job is not to take the bait. We hold our assigned sectors, maintain discipline, and trust that adjacent units are doing their jobs. The moment we start shifting forces around reactively, we create gaps they can exploit. The briefing continued for another hour, going through contingencies, fallback positions, ammunition distribution, casualty evacuation procedures, and the order to destroy the armory if the base was about to be overrun. Nobody liked that last part, but everyone understood it. When the formal briefing ended, Morrison approached Sarah with a question that had clearly been bothering him. Can I ask you something personal, Commander? Go ahead. Why'd they really pull you from DVGRU? Training accidents happen all the time, guys rehab and come back. But you're here, doing staff work instead of being back with your team. What's the real story? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the map without really seeing it. The injury was worse than I let on earlier. I can still shoot, still fight, still do most things. But I can't do them at the level DEVGRU requires. Can't fast rope anymore. My shoulder won't hold my body weight on the descent. Can't do halo jumps. The opening shock would dislocate it. Can't spend 6 hours swimming in full kit. It gives out after about 90 minutes now. She turned to face him. DVGRU doesn't need someone who can do the job most of the time, Jake. They need people who can do it every single time under any conditions without limitations. I couldn't be that person anymore. So they gave me a choice. Take a staff position, help train the next generation, or retire. That must have been brutal. It was like losing a part of my identity, Sarah admitted. The teams were everything to me. Being a SEAL wasn't what I did, it was who I was. When that got taken away, she shook her head. I thought about retiring actually. Figured if I couldn't serve at that level, why serve at all? What changed your mind? Sarah gestured around the command center. Missions like this. I realized that experience is valuable even if you're not kicking doors anymore. That teaching others to survive, to be better, to make it home, that matters too. Maybe it matters more, actually. One operator can make a difference in a mission. But a good instructor, a good commander, can make a difference in 100 missions through the people they train. Morrison nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm damn glad they sent you here. Ask me again in 48 hours, Sarah said with a tired smile. You might feel differently if this all goes sideways. It won't, you won't let it. Sarah wished she had his confidence. The hours crawled by. Sarah walked the perimeter again, stopping at each defensive position to check on the Marines and sailors who'd be holding the line. At Tower 3, she found Private Hernandez on watch, his hand steady on his weapon now, fear replaced by determined readiness. How you feeling, Marine? Ready, ma'am, scared but ready. Good, fear keeps you sharp. Just remember your training. At the southern perimeter, where the morning's attack had come, she found Costa supervising last-minute preparations. Sandbags were double-stacked now, firing lanes cleared, ammunition stockpiled within easy reach. This sector's going to be their main effort, Costa said. They tasted success here this morning. They'll come hard. I know, that's why I'm putting my best people here. Sarah met his eyes. Can you hold? We'll hold or die trying, ma'am. I'd prefer you hold and live, Staff Sergeant. Costa cracked a rare smile. We'll do our best on both counts. She found Webb at the armory, personally checking the demolition charges they'd rigged as a last resort. Gunny, I need you to understand something. If I give the order to blow the armory, there's no hesitation, no second guessing. Those weapons cannot fall into enemy hands. Understood, ma'am. I've got the detonator. When you give the word, it's done. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. I'm into that. As midnight approached, Sarah stood on the command center roof, looking out over the base. Lights were dimmed, positions manned, weapons loaded. Every soldier knew their sector, their fields of fire, their fallback route. They'd done everything humanly possible to prepare. Morrison joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Figured you could use this. Thanks. Sarah accepted the cup gratefully, letting the warmth seep into her hands. The night was cold and getting colder. You think we're ready? Sarah considered the question carefully. I think we've done everything we can with the time we had. The Marines are solid, the defensive positions are good, and everyone knows the plan. But there are no guarantees in combat, Jake. The enemy gets a vote too. What are our real chances? Honest answer. If everything goes according to plan, we hold with moderate casualties. If things go wrong, if they have surprise capabilities we didn't anticipate, if they're more organized than we expect, if we get unlucky, then it becomes a fight for survival. Morrison sipped his coffee, not exactly reassuring. Would you prefer I lie to you? No, I prefer the truth, even when it's hard. He was quiet for a moment. Sarah, if things go really bad, if we're about to get overrun, I want you to know it's been an honor. You gave us a fighting chance. Whatever happens, you did that. Sarah felt emotion tighten her throat but kept her voice steady. It's been an honor for me too. You and your Marines, Webb and his team, Costa, all of them. You're the reason I still serve. This is what matters. Not the medals or the missions that make the news. This, keeping good people alive. They stood in companionable silence, drinking coffee and watching the dark horizon. Somewhere out there, an enemy force was preparing to attack. Weapons were being checked, assault routes reviewed, final prayers offered to whatever gods they served. And here on Fob Sentinel, American warriors were doing the same. The waiting was almost over. The first mortar round screamed out of the darkness at 2:37 hours, the distinctive whistle giving Sarah exactly 2 seconds of warning before impact. She was already diving for cover when the explosion ripped through the night, obliterating Guard Tower 3 in a geyser of flame and shattered concrete. Incoming, all personnel, hardened positions now. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos on the command net, calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. More mortars followed, a devastating barrage that walked across the base with terrifying precision. They'd pre-sighted their targets, adjusted for wind and elevation. Professional work. The explosions marched toward the command center, the motor pool, the barracks, anywhere that might hold concentrations of personnel. But the buildings were mostly empty. Sarah's revised defensive plan had dispersed forces into hardened fighting positions across the perimeter. The mortars hit concrete and sandbags instead of flesh and bone. Contact northeast. Multiple hostiles, approximately 20 individuals, 200 meters out. The voice belonged to Corporal Jackson, his training overriding his fear. Contact south. I count 30+ moving in squad formations. That was Costa, his sector taking the brunt of it exactly as Sarah had predicted. Northwest perimeter reporting movement. Thermal signatures, maybe 15 strong. Sarah stood in the command center, surrounded by radio sets and tactical displays, her mind processing information at combat speed. 3 axes of attack, just as anticipated. She keyed her mic. All stations, hold your fire until they reach the engagement line. Let them come to us. Crew-served weapons, pick your targets. Riflemen, fire discipline, aimed shots only. The enemy advanced under cover of their mortar barrage, professional and coordinated. Through the night vision-equipped cameras, Sarah watched them move, fire and maneuver tactics, proper spacing, suppressive fire covering advancing elements. These weren't poorly trained insurgents. These were soldiers. Morrison's voice crackled over the net from the northeast sector. They're probing the wire, testing our response. Permission to engage. Negative, let them think we're stunned. Wait for it. Sarah could feel the tension building, every defender wanting to shoot, to do something, to release the fear through action. But discipline held. They trusted her. They waited. The insurgents reached the wire, cutting through it with practiced efficiency. 50 meters out now, 40, 30. All stations engage. The night erupted in thunder and lightning. Every defensive position opened fire simultaneously, a coordinated wall of lead that caught the advancing insurgents in a perfectly orchestrated kill zone. The M240 machine guns hammered out their deadly rhythm, tracer rounds drawing red lines through the darkness. M4 rifles cracked in controlled pairs. The 4-team grenade launcher coughed, its rounds detonating among enemy formations with devastating effect. The first assault wave staggered, broke, fell back in disarray. Sarah allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The defensive positions were working exactly as designed. But the enemy adapted quickly. RPG incoming, south sector. Costa's warning came a heartbeat before the rocket-propelled grenade streaked across the compound, impacting the southern fighting position with a deafening blast. The explosion threw 2 Marines backwards, their bodies ragdoll limp. Corpsman, south sector casualties. Webb's voice tight with controlled fear. Sarah was already moving, grabbing her rifle and aid bag. Morrison, you have command. I'm going to south sector. Sarah, wait. But she was already out the door, sprinting through the darkness toward the sound of heavy fighting. Bullets snapped through the air around her, that distinctive crack that meant they were close, too close. She didn't slow down. The southern sector was hell on earth. Costa's Marines were pinned down by heavy machine gun fire, the distinctive hammering of a DSHK tearing chunks out of their fortifications. The 2 wounded Marines lay exposed, 10 feet from cover, bleeding out while their brothers couldn't reach them. Sarah assessed the situation in a heartbeat. The enemy machine gun was positioned behind a rocky outcrop 200 meters out, providing covering fire for another assault wave forming up in the darkness. If she didn't neutralize it, this sector would fall. Costa, suppressive fire on my mark, then shift left. I'm going for our wounded. You'll never make it, ma'am. Watch me, on my mark now. The Marines opened up, every weapon firing at maximum rate, forcing the enemy to take cover. Sarah burst from the fighting position, running low and fast toward the wounded men. Rounds kicked up dirt around her feet. Something tugged at her sleeve, a near miss that would haunt her later. She reached the first Marine, grabbed his drag handle, and hauled him toward cover with strength born of desperation and training. A round sparked off the ground inches from her boot. Costa's team was screaming, covering fire, their muzzles glowing orange in the darkness. 15 feet to cover, 10, 5. Hands reached out, pulling the wounded Marine to safety. Sarah didn't stop, didn't rest. She turned and ran back out for the second man, her lungs burning, legs screaming protest. The DSHK found her range. Rounds stitched across the ground, converging on her position. Sarah threw herself flat as the heavy rounds passed overhead, feeling the supersonic shock waves. Then she was up again, reaching the second Marine, grabbing, pulling, dragging. The insurgent gunner adjusted fire. A round caught her left leg, spinning her around. White-hot pain exploded through her calf, but training and adrenaline overrode it. She kept moving, kept dragging, kept fighting toward that line of safety. Costa and 2 other Marines charged out to meet her, grabbing the wounded man, covering her retreat with their bodies. Together, they stumbled back into the fighting position as the DSHK tried to kill them all. Sarah collapsed against the sandbags, her legs screaming. Blood soaked through her pant leg, but she could still move it, still feel her toes. Through and through, probably missed the bone. She'd had worse. Corpsman, Costa was beside her, his face pale in the darkness. "Forget me, treat them first," Sarah gasped, gesturing to the 2 Marines she'd pulled from the kill zone. "I can wait." The corpsman hesitated, then moved to the more seriously wounded. Sarah pulled out her personal medical kit, applying a pressure bandage to her own leg with practiced efficiency. The pain was intense but manageable. She'd been shot before. "Ma'am, you're completely insane," Costa said, something like awe in his voice. "Just doing my job, Staff Sergeant." Sarah dragged herself back up to the firing line, her leg protesting every movement. "Now let's finish ours. That machine gun has to go." She pulled out her radio. "Morrison, I need immediate fire mission, South Sector. DSHK positioned at grid November 7 3492, range 200 meters, dug in behind rocks. Can you get the mortarmen on it?" "Already dialing it in. Fire mission in 30 seconds. Sarah watched through her rifle scope, counting down. The enemy machine gun continued its devastating fire, pinning down multiple positions. Then the American 60 mortar rounds began falling, walking toward the target with mathematical precision. The third round was a direct hit. The DSHK and its crew disappeared in a flash of high explosive. "Target destroyed," Sarah called out. "South Sector, push them back, don't let them regroup." Costa's Marines surged forward with renewed energy, their fire disciplined but aggressive. The enemy assault wave that had been forming broke apart under the pressure, falling back into the darkness. But the battle was far from over. Northeast Sector taking heavy fire. "We've got dismounted technical vehicles moving in, multiple heavy weapons." Northwest breach. "They're through the wire, close combat, need immediate QRF." Sarah forced herself to stand, testing her wounded leg. It held barely. She keyed her radio, her voice still steady despite the pain and chaos. "All sectors report status. I need a picture." The reports came in fast. Northeast under pressure but holding. Northwest had enemy inside the perimeter. East was quiet, too quiet. The feint Sarah had predicted. Eastern Sector, maintain your positions. Do not respond to calls for reinforcement. That's exactly what they want. She switched channels. Quick Reaction Force, Northwest Sector, enemy inside the wire. Weapons free, close quarters rules of engagement. Morrison's voice cut in. Sarah, we're losing the northwest corner. They're pushing hard for the armory, if they get through. They won't. Sarah's response was ice-cold certainty. I'm moving to that sector now. Hold what you've got, Jake. We're not giving them anything. She grabbed her rifle, checked her magazine, and looked at Costa. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes were clear and determined. Gunny Webb has the detonator for the armory, she said quietly. If I fall, if we can't hold them, he knows what to do. Costa nodded grimly. Yes, ma'am, but you're not going to fall, none of us are. Damn right we're not. Sarah checked her leg one more time. The bleeding had slowed, the bandage was holding. Good enough. Let's go kill some bad guys. She limped toward the northwest sector, where the sound of close-quarters combat echoed through the night. Behind her, Costa rallied his Marines, their voices raised in defiant challenge to the enemy still trying to break through. The battle for Fob Sentinel had entered its critical phase. The next hour would determine everything: victory or annihilation, survival or sacrifice. Sarah Chen had been in this position before, where everything balanced on a knife's edge, where courage and skill and desperation all mixed together in the crucible of combat. She'd survived before. She intended to survive again. The northwestern sector had become a nightmare of close-quarters combat. Sarah limped through the smoke and chaos, her wounded leg protesting every step, rifle up and ready. Enemy combatants had breached the wire and were fighting among the storage containers and supply buildings, exactly the kind of urban combat that favored neither side, where training and will mattered more than numbers. A figure emerged from behind a Connex container, AK-47 raised. Sarah's muscle memory took over. She fired twice, center mass, the insurgent dropping before he could get a shot off. Another appeared to her left. She pivoted, ignoring the screaming pain in her leg, and engaged. 2 more rounds. Another threat eliminated. Grenade. Someone screamed. Sarah threw herself behind a concrete barrier as the explosion rattled her teeth and filled the air with deadly fragments. Her ears rang, but she was already moving again, flowing from cover to cover with the fluid grace that years of CQB training had burned into her nervous system. Webb's Marines were fighting desperately around the armory entrance, a thin line of defenders against a determined enemy push. Sarah could see the insurgent commander now, a tall man with a scarred face, directing his fighters with hand signals, coordinating their assault with professional precision. He was good, dangerously good, Commander. Webb's voice over the radio. They're going to breach the armory. I'm preparing to execute demolition protocol. Negative. Sarah shouted back, dropping another insurgent who tried to flank Webb's position. Give me 2 minutes. Do not blow that building. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. Instead, she keyed the command net. All units, this is Chen. The enemy is committed to the northwest sector. They've pulled forces from other axes to make this push. Northeast and south sectors, I need aggressive counterattack now. Push them hard, make them think they're about to lose everywhere else. Force them to pull back from the armory. Morrison's response was immediate. Northeast pushing now, Costa's voice followed. South sector advancing, engaging enemy fallback positions. The gambit was pure calculated aggression. Instead of reinforcing the threatened sector, Sarah was attacking everywhere the enemy had weakened themselves. It was risky, bordering on reckless, but it was also exactly the kind of tactical boldness that could break an enemy's will. The insurgent commander recognized it too. Through the smoke, Sarah saw him hesitate, listening to reports over his radio, realizing his assault was faltering everywhere except this one critical point. He had to make a choice: commit everything to taking the armory or pull back and regroup. He chose to commit. All remaining forces hit the armory. Now. His command was in Pashto, but Sarah understood enough to know what was coming. Every remaining insurgent converged on Webb's position in a desperate final push. 20 fighters, maybe more, throwing themselves at the thin line of defenders with the fury of men who knew this was their last chance. Webb, fall back to secondary positions. Give ground but make them pay for it. Sarah was moving toward the armory now, limping but fast, her rifle barking controlled pairs. She dropped one insurgent, then another, but they kept coming. A round caught her in the chest, slamming into her body armor with enough force to knock her backwards. The impact drove the air from her lungs, leaving her gasping. Through pure willpower, she stayed on her feet, returning fire at the insurgent who'd shot her. The man went down. Pain radiated from her chest, probably cracked ribs under the armor, but nothing she couldn't fight through. She had to fight through it. Because Webb's Marines were being overwhelmed, falling back step by bloody step, and if they broke, the armory fell. Sarah reached the defensive line just as the insurgent commander himself led the final charge. He was magnificent and terrifying, a warrior in his element, inspiring his men through personal courage and leading from the front. His fighters surged forward with renewed energy. "Hold this line." Sarah's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Nobody gives another inch. She stepped into the gap where a wounded Marine had fallen, planting herself like an oak tree, her rifle working methodically. Shoot, assess, shoot, movement to the left, engage, target down, shift right, fire. The training was automatic, her body executing while her mind processed the bigger tactical picture. The insurgent commander saw her, recognized her as the key, the leader holding this defense together. Their eyes met across 30 meters of smoke and death, and in that instant both understood that this battle would be decided between them. He advanced, his fighters providing covering fire. Sarah stood her ground, emptying her magazine into the advancing enemy, dropping 3 before the bolt locked back on empty. No time to reload. He was closing too fast. She let the rifle drop on its sling, her hand moving to the Sig Sauer on her hip. The insurgent commander fired his AK on the move, rounds snapping past Sarah's head. She drew and fired in one smooth motion, years of training compressed into a fraction of a second. Her first shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him. Her second hit center mass, stopped by his armor. He stumbled but didn't fall, bringing his rifle back up with his good arm. They closed to within 10 meters, both warriors too committed to break off. Sarah's third shot hit his rifle, shattering the receiver. Her fourth caught him in the leg, bringing him down. But he wasn't finished. Even wounded, he pulled a pistol, his face twisted with pain and determination. Sarah's wounded leg chose that moment to give out, dropping her to one knee just as he fired. The round passed through the space where her head had been a heartbeat before. She didn't hesitate. Her knife came out of its sheath on her vest, her body moving through the close combat techniques that SEAL instructors had drilled into her until they became instinct. She closed the distance before he could fire again, inside his guard, her knife finding the gap in his body armor. The insurgent commander's eyes widened in shock and pain. Then they dimmed. Sarah pulled back, breathing hard, every part of her body screaming in pain. Around her, the enemy assault had faltered with their leader's fall. Confusion rippled through their ranks. "Now," Sarah screamed into her radio, "all sectors full assault, break them." The response was instantaneous. Marines and sailors who'd been defending desperately suddenly became attackers, pouring fire into the disorganized enemy. Morrison's MSOT hit them from the northeast. Costa's team hammered them from the south. Webb's Marines surged forward from the armory, no longer defending but destroying. And then, cutting through the chaos like the voice of God, Sarah heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the distinctive whoop-whoop-whoop of helicopter rotors. "All friendlies, mark your positions. Air support inbound." 2 AH-64 Apache helicopters materialized out of the darkness, their thermal targeting systems painting the battlefield with invisible light. The lead pilot's voice came over the radio, calm and professional. "Ghost 6, this is Rampage 11. We have eyes on multiple hostiles in the open, requesting clearance to engage." Sarah looked at the enemy fighters, still dangerous, still numerous, but now leaderless and caught in the open. No mercy. Not after what they'd tried to do here tonight. Rampage 1-1, you are cleared hot. Light them up. The Apache opened fire with their 13 chain guns, the distinctive BRRRRT sound of their cannons drowning out all other noise. High-explosive rounds tore through enemy positions with devastating precision. The insurgents broke, their coordinated assault dissolving into panicked flight. But there was nowhere to run from attack helicopters with thermal imaging. The Apache methodically engaged every heat signature attempting to flee, their Hellfire missiles turning vehicles and heavy weapons positions into funeral pyres. Within 5 minutes, it was over. The enemy force that had numbered 60+ strong was destroyed, killed, captured, or scattered into the desert where they'd pose no further threat. The attack on Fob Sentinel had failed catastrophically. Sarah remained on her knees, the adrenaline finally draining from her system, leaving behind only pain and exhaustion. Webb appeared beside her, his face blackened by smoke and powder, his eyes showing the 1,000-yard stare of a man who'd fought hand-to-hand for his life. "Commander," he said hoarsely, "we held." "You held, Gunny, you and your Marines, you magnificent bastards actually held." Sarah tried to stand, but her leg refused. Webb caught her before she fell. "Corpsman, I need a corpsman for the commander." "Negative," Sarah protested weakly. "Treat the others first, I can wait." "With respect, ma'am, shut up and let us help you." Sarah wanted to argue, but the fight had left her with nothing. She sagged against Webb as the corpsman arrived, beginning triage on her wounds. The gunshot wound to her leg, the cracked ribs, the numerous cuts and contusions from close combat. Morrison appeared, his uniform torn and bloody but his eyes alive with fierce pride. "Sarah, we did it. We actually did it. Casualty report is coming in, but we held the base. You were right. They came exactly how you predicted, and we were ready." Costa limped up, his arm in a hasty sling but grinning through the pain. "That thing you did, Commander, attacking while they were pushing the armory, that was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. You broke their momentum, made them commit to a losing fight." "It was a team effort," Sarah said, her voice fatting. "The corpsman had given her morphine and it was starting to work. All of you, every Marine, every sailor, you trusted the plan. You held your sectors, you fought like warriors." Her eyes were closing despite her efforts to keep them open. "Casualties, how many?" "Rest, ma'am," Webb said gently. "We'll have the full count soon, but you saved a lot of lives tonight, maybe all of us." Sarah's last conscious thought was that she'd found her new purpose. Not kicking doors with DEVGRU, but this. Leading warriors, preparing them, keeping them alive when the worst came calling. As darkness claimed her, she heard Webb's voice one more time. "Somebody get a medevac for the commander, and somebody better write this up proper, because what she did tonight was worth another damn medal." Part 8. Aftermath Extended Version. Dawn broke over Fob Sentinel like a painter's masterpiece, brilliant oranges and deep purples staining the smoke-hazed sky. Sarah Chen sat on the steps of the command center, her wounded leg stretched out before her, freshly bandaged by the exhausted medical team. The morphine had worn off, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache that reminded her she was still alive. The base looked like it had been through hell, because it had. Shattered guard towers stood like broken teeth against the morning sky. Bullet holes pockmarked every surface. Spent brass casings littered the ground like deadly confetti. Burn marks scarred the earth where enemy mortars had found their targets. But the flag still flew, torn and scorched, but flying. 12 flag-draped bodies lay in respectful silence outside the medical facility. 12 warriors who'd given everything. 23 wounded, ranging from minor to critical. Sarah knew every name, had visited every wounded soldier during the night, ignoring her own injuries until the medics literally forced her to sit down. Colonel Hartley emerged from the command center, looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. He sat down heavily beside Sarah, groaning as his own bruised body protested. Final count, he said quietly. 63 enemy KIA confirmed, another 8 captured and being medevaced for interrogation. We recovered 2 DSHK heavy machine guns, 14 AK pattern rifles, multiple RPGs, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. He paused. Your assessment was accurate, Commander. If we hadn't prepared, if we'd still been running the old defensive posture, we'd all be dead, Sarah finished for him. I know, sir, but we weren't. Because your Marines and sailors are exceptional warriors who just needed someone to show them what they were capable of. That someone was you. Sarah shook her head, wincing at the movement. No, sir, I was just the catalyst. Morrison's tactical execution was flawless. Costa held the southern sector against overwhelming odds. Webb's defense of the armory was textbook. Every squad leader, every fire team, every individual Marine and sailor, they're the ones who won this fight. Morrison approached, carrying 3 cups of coffee that looked like they'd been made from motor oil and desperation. He handed one to Sarah, one to Hartley, kept the third for himself. Rampage Flight just called in, Morrison said. They tracked the survivors about 15 clicks out before losing them in the mountains. Word's already spreading through enemy networks. FOB Sentinel is a death trap, not worth attacking. We just became the base nobody wants to mess with. Good, Sarah said, sipping the terrible coffee and savoring it anyway. That's fewer fights we'll have to win. The sound of boots on gravel announced Costa's arrival. His arm was properly splinted now, and a medic had cleaned the blood from his face, revealing bruises that would be spectacular by evening. Commander, the Marines asked me to tell you something. He stood at attention despite his injuries. They want you to know that you're one of us now. You bled with us, fought with us, and earned your place. You're a Marine in spirit, even if the Navy got you first. Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. Coming from Costa, who'd been so resistant at first, it meant everything. That's the highest compliment I could receive, Staff Sergeant. Thank you. Webb appeared next, followed by a stream of Marines and sailors, walking wounded, exhausted defenders, support personnel who'd kept the base running during the battle. They formed up without orders, standing at attention despite their injuries. Webb's voice rang out formal and proud. Attention to orders. Sarah tried to stand, but Morrison gently pressed her back down. Let them come to you, Commander. You've done enough standing for one day. Hartley stood instead, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. This is irregular as hell, he admitted, but these are irregular circumstances. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, by the authority vested in me as commanding officer of Forward Operating Base Sentinel, and in recognition of extraordinary heroism in combat. He continued reading the citation he'd drafted during the pre-dawn hours, Sarah's actions during the battle, her leadership, her refusal to abandon wounded Marines under fire, her tactical brilliance that had turned potential defeat into decisive victory. This recommendation for the Navy Cross will be forwarded through proper channels, but I wanted you to know here now, in front of the warriors you led, that your actions saved this base and everyone in it. The assembled personnel erupted in cheers and applause that echoed across the compound. Sarah sat stunned, overwhelmed by the recognition and the respect shining in every face around her. But it was what happened next that truly moved her. Private Hernandez, the young Marine who'd frozen during the first attack, who Sarah had counseled and encouraged, stepped forward. His voice was shaky but clear. Commander, I just wanted to say, you told me I wouldn't freeze when it mattered. You were right. When they came through the wire, I did my job, I fought, and I'm alive because you believed in me before I believed in myself. Sarah's eyes misted. You're alive because you're a warrior, Hernandez. You just needed to discover that about yourself. As the crowd began to disperse, returning to the endless tasks of damage control and recovery, Morrison helped Sarah to her feet. A helicopter was inbound, her medical evacuation to the trauma center in Kandahar for proper treatment. "What happens after you heal up?" Morrison asked. Sarah looked around at Fob Sentinel, scarred, battered, but unbroken. She thought about the Marines who'd trusted her, the battle they'd won together, the lives saved through preparation and leadership. "I go wherever they send me next," she said. "Another base that needs assessment, another unit that needs training. My shoulder might have ended my time kicking doors, but it opened something better, a chance to make a difference in dozens of missions, hundreds of lives." She smiled, genuine and peaceful. "I thought losing DEVGRU meant my war was over. I was wrong. It just meant my war changed. And maybe this fight, training warriors, preparing them, keeping them alive, maybe this is where I was meant to be all along." The helicopter touched down, its rotors kicking up dust and debris. As the medical team helped Sarah aboard, she looked back one last time at the base she'd helped defend. Costa stood at attention, rendering a perfect salute. Then Webb joined him. Then Morrison. Then one by one, every Marine and sailor capable of standing came to attention, saluting the commander who'd saved them all. The fresh recruit they'd mocked had become the warrior who led them through hell and brought them home. And in those 40 seconds of combat that first revealed her true identity, she'd found something precious. Proof that her fight wasn't over, that she still had more to give, that purpose could be found in unexpected places. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying her toward recovery and whatever came next, Sarah Chen smiled. Her war had just begun. In a different way, with a different mission, but no less important. She would train the next generation, prepare them, lead them. And when the darkness came calling, she would ensure they were ready to stand and fight. Because that's what warriors do. They never surrender, they never quit. They adapt, overcome, and continue the fight.